Hi guys, today we'll understand Promise.all method in JavaScript. So without any delay, let's get started. Let me just directly show you the code and then I'll make you understand what it is. No, so let's make few promises. Let's say let p1 equals to, it could be, I'll just resolve this promise. No, instead of writing it the whole, I'll just resolve this promise like this. If you don't know how this resolve or reject method works, you need to watch my previous video. Okay, so I'll resolve it and it will, what it will do, let's say uh, it will get me all LinkedIn posts. Okay, now let's have p2 and see what it can do. I'll say promise.resolve and I'll say get me all tweets. Now I'll have p3 and what it will do, it will also be resolved, this promise will also be resolved and it will uh, get me all insta pics. Okay, so now let's apply the promise.all method on it. How will we do it is, first let me tell you something. uh, in general we apply this promise.all method on fetch calls. Fetch is a promise in itself. What happens is, let's say we want to fetch something from a server or from a URL. So here is how fetch works. I'll enter the URL, some URL I'll enter, and then it's, since it's a promise itself, we'll use dot then, and like here we'll say do something, and then I can use dot then or I can use dot catch. So it's similar to promise itself. No, so in general we use this promise.all method with fetch calls, but I'll be using promises here because it will be easier to understand. No, so let's do it. I'll say promise.all, and remember one thing, this promise.all method takes an array of promises. Okay, so let me just modify it a little bit so that you guys could understand that yes, we could write promise in this way also. It doesn't matter, it's just an arrow function which returns this. So yeah, so let's first write p1 and we have to write it this way, then we'll have p2, then we'll have p3. This is the sequence in which we are providing the promises to promise dot all. Okay, and and uh, then we'll do dot then and we'll get some response, and I'll just console dot the response so that you guys could see what we are getting in the response. Just console log response. Okay, so let's see. We are getting get all LinkedIn posts, but in case of p2, okay, I wrote p1 here. No, see here p2. Okay, see here we are getting all three promises resolved results of all three promises in an array. Okay, that is what we are getting in the console. See, we are first getting p1, then we are getting p2, then we are getting p3. Okay, and we could also write it like this also, like we could do uh, just let me, we could do response 1, since this is an array, and then I could say like response 2, and then I could say like response 3. Okay, 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 just console log. I could, there is no 3, there is, let's here like write 0. No, because array indexes starts from 0. So I'll just console.log this response also, and here you can see I got all the three responses in the console. Okay, first P2, then P3, then P0, this one. Okay, so that's done. Now what happens in promise.all? Promise.all will only return this response when all of these promises will be resolved. Let me reiterate, promise.all will return these responses only when all of the promises are resolved. So let me write it down. So all must be resolved. Okay, if any of the promises gets rejected, if any of the promises gets rejected, then this promise.all won't work. We also have to give the catch block in that case. So let me just do, let me just reject this, let me just reject this P2. Okay, let's just reject P2 and see what happens. So I rejected P2, and let me just provide a catch block now. Let me say catch, and I'll say error, and just console.log error. And now you guys can see in the console we are getting the P2 only, because that is the promise that get rejected, and hence this catch will get executed, and we inside the catch will get the result from the promise which gets rejected. If let's say more than one promise gets rejected, so which error will get from P2, P3, P4, like which response will get, no, from whether we'll get response from P2 if P2 is rejected, if P3 is also rejected, whether we get response from P3. So that might be the confusion in your mind. So in that case what happens is whichever promise uh, gets rejected first will get that as response in this catch block. Let me reiterate, whichever promise gets rejected first will get that as a response in this catch block. Okay, so let me just show you. Let's just write this, let's just also reject this. Let me write this in a like proper manner, how we write promise, new promise, and I'll set that set timeout so that it will be rejected after some time. Okay, so I'll just say resolve reject, and then I'll just set timeout, and here I'll reject it, and I'll say do it after 2 seconds, and and pass something like uh, P3 rejected, say this. Okay, so now see what happens. Let me refresh this, and you guys can see we get this only, we get P2 only, not P3. Okay, okay, so this is the case. And one more thing, let me tell you, if all of these promises get resolved, when do you think we'll get the result? Okay, so I resolve this. Let me just reject this, and then I'll show you what will happen. Just reject this. Oh no, I sorry. Okay, now let me tell you, let's say all of these promises are resolved. Let's say this is resolved, let's say this also gets resolved, but this is resolved after 2 seconds. Okay, so let's see. I refreshed it and we won't see any result. We see the result after 2 seconds. So we got the result only after all the promises get resolved. Okay, and if any of them is rejected, we'll get the response from the rejected ones, whichever the promise gets rejected the first. Okay, so yeah, and we get the response in an array, and this array's elements are aligned in the same sequence in which we passed the promises. First we get P1, then P2, then P3. The sequence will be the same. Okay, so yeah, that's all about Promise.all. If you guys like this video, I'll really appreciate if you could subscribe to my channel. So yeah, thanks for watching.